Alright, let's continue with a couple more modifiers. Modifiers in the modifier property. We're going to try to look at two here. One is called a remesh and one is called wireframe. So let's look at the remesh one first. So let's start with a good old Suzanne head. Let's click on modifier and just go straight to remesh. Alright, so it's going to look really jacked up. So the default remesh setting is set to sharp. Now if you increase the number of this octree depth, you'll start to see kind of what it's doing. It's remesh is trying to redraw the mesh in a different way, and it can be useful if you have something that's kind of a model with some holes in it, or something that you have through the modeling process you've created some problems. You can use this modifier to try to correct them, but you can also use it in other sort of creative ways. So if you bring this back down to 4, and let's change the mode from sharp to blocks. They should just call this the Minecraft modifier. So if you go to blocks and you increase the octree depth to 8, you start to see what it's doing, which is basically creating a kind of blocky model. So that's a fun thing to play with. And the other one would be smooth. And smooth, again, if you play around with this, you'll see what it's really doing. It's kind of very destructive on the lower levels, and then on the higher levels, it's using this kind of clunky way of like a blocky way of dealing with the edges and the sharp edges. Basically, you can look at this with smooth shading on. You can play around with the threshold, although I don't see that doing a lot. So that's the remesh tool. Just so you know it's there. It's not something that I want to spend a lot of time talking about for now. So I'm going to undo that to remember you can remove that. And let's talk next about another modifier called wireframe, which is pretty cool. So let's delete this head for now. Shift A. Let's make a icosphere. Let's give it 3 subdivisions. Alright, so I've got this icosphere. Now, if you go to wireframe, this is the second modifier I want to talk about in this video, so go to wireframe. By default, you already should see what it's doing. This, I have to say, is pretty powerful, that it's just built in like this. In order to do something like this in Maya a few years ago, it was much more difficult. So this is a pretty neat tool. So it takes the edges and essentially creates a wireframe, but it's a wireframe model. So you can increase the thickness or decrease the thickness. You can play around a little bit with this even thickness, relative thickness. So find something that you feel is interesting. Now, again, if I tab into edit mode, I have not changed the geometry, but if I apply it, now I've got a completely different model that is basically a wireframe kind of cage. So this could be, you could make a 3D model of this object very easily. It would be this hollow, pretty cool hollow thing. So let's look at that with one other object and look at a couple of the other options. Let's just move this over. Oops, grab, move it over, and let's create a torus, and we'll leave the default settings. Okay, add modifier, wireframe. Alright, so make the thickness a little thinner. Now this is pretty neat. If you uncheck the checkbox called Replace Original, which removes the original geometry, you get kind of the best of both worlds. You have your original geometry there, all the faces are there, it's not hollow anymore, but you still have this pretty neat function of this kind of wireframe on top of it. So you create a really different looking object, and you can find a lot of ways to use this. So if I apply that, now I've got this this other kind of shape. So that's the wireframe and the remesh modifiers.